You pay us 105 grand a year for the rest of your life and no more fucking around!
Modern streaming offers thousands of titles and somehow nothing worth watching. The algorithm feeds you safe focus group content designed to offend nobody and satisfy nobody. Endless mediocrity engineered for background noise. Meanwhile, 10 forgotten masterpieces from the late 70s and 80s sit buried in licensing hell, films that took risks no studio would greenlight today. The film refuses to soften Stanley White's racism or obsession, as the newly assigned police captain wages a one-man war against Chinatown's rising triad leader Joey Tai, trusting that watching a decorated Vietnam veteran's crusade destroy his marriage and career would be more compelling than a sanitized hero. This is the exact opposite of every algorithm-approved cop show where moral complexity gets sanded down for mass appeal. To play the 45-year-old white, 32-year-old Mickey Rourke dyed his hair stark gray and hired a Hells Angels member as his personal trainer, then stayed hostile between takes, adopting the character's abrasive personality so completely that co-stars found him genuinely intimidating. Director Michael Cimino spent $5 million building a fake Chinatown in North Carolina, so detailed that when footage leaked, industry insiders assumed he'd somehow controlled lighting on actual New York streets, only discovering later it was all backlot. Asian American groups organized massive protests forcing MGM to add disclaimers to 200 prints at enormous expense. Then the film grossed only $18.7 million on a $24 million budget, killing Cimino's career but creating a masterpiece whose willingness to wade into controversy without apology remains unmatched. Though at least Cimino's vision made it to theaters intact.
You know, most drug dealers are morons, Joey, but I gotta hand it to you. You one silky son of a bitch.
Two escaped convicts, hardened bank robber Manny and his naive accomplice Buck, board a freight train fleeing through Alaska, only to discover the engineer has died of a heart attack, leaving them trapped on a runaway locomotive hurtling toward catastrophe. The film treats this setup as inevitability rather than action spectacle. Jon Voight's convict, standing on the speeding train in a blizzard, not as heroism, but as suicidal defiance against captivity itself. Voight spent weeks inside San Quentin, living among inmates, wore fake stained teeth and nostril obstructions to distort his face, pushing to near total exhaustion in sub-zero Alaskan conditions to capture a man who'd rather die free than live caged. A helicopter pilot died when his aircraft hit a power line during location scouting. Production continuing despite tragedy in conditions so brutal, the crew used fake snow because actual temperatures caused false spring. Danny Trejo showed up as a drug counselor managing rampant cocaine use on set, got recognized as a former San Quentin boxing champion, and cast immediately, launching a decades-long career from pure authenticity that modern casting directors would never risk. Voight's performance earned an Oscar nomination, but the physical commitment required would get an actor labeled difficult today. Studios terrified of insurance liability choosing competent professionals over dangerous brilliance, a pattern that started with survival and ended with safety becoming the only acceptable option.
Somebody's blowing the goddamn whistle on that train, Mr. McDonald, and you would have killed him just like that!
Kevin Costner nearly killed himself and crew members during high-speed chases because he insisted on doing his own stunts despite terrible vision, refusing to wear prescription glasses to maintain the character's look. The production's insurance company was furious as Costner repeatedly slammed into sets during a Georgetown Mall foot chase, lacking depth perception to judge distances, forcing crew to place oversized marks he could actually see. The film follows Navy officer Tom Farrell, who begins an affair with a woman, unaware she's also the mistress of his new boss, the Secretary of Defense. When the secretary accidentally kills her during a jealous rage, his aide invents a fictional Soviet mole to blame, then puts Farrell in charge of hunting this phantom, forcing him to outrun his own investigation. The film required unprecedented Pentagon access, but the Department of Defense maintained shadow oversight, uncomfortable with a script portraying the secretary as murderer and the Pentagon as nest of Soviet infiltration. What makes the paranoid atmosphere work is how real-world friction with military minders fed directly into themes of institutional corruption and surveillance. Director Roger Donaldson fought Orion Pictures over the shocking Yuri twist ending, test audiences vocally feeling betrayed, but Costner backed the director's vision. The $15 million gamble grossed $35.5 million and launched Costner into stardom, but the film's cynical view of power and willingness to make its hero complicit is exactly what streaming platforms actively avoid. Their algorithms trained to surface content that reaffirms rather than challenges.
I'm Commander Farrell, Miss Beaker. This is Mr. Scott Pritchard, General Counsel of the Secretary of Defense. May we come in?
George C. Scott watched real pornography featuring adult actress Marilyn Chambers for the first time while cameras rolled, director Paul Schrader deliberately hiding the footage until the moment to capture genuine shock on a deeply religious actor's face. Scott's scream of "my God" as Jake Van Dorn, a Calvinist searching for his daughter in the Los Angeles porn industry, became the marketing centerpiece because the crew fell into stunned silence watching him channel actual religious horror rather than perform disgust. The film only exists because Schrader walked away from Warren Beatty and $500,000 after Beatty demanded rewrites, making the protagonist search for a missing girlfriend instead of daughter, insisting he was too young and handsome to play a father. Schrader used his influence to direct the original vision with Scott, needing one of the greatest actors alive to embody righteous fury Beatty couldn't access. The relationship was famously combative, Scott retreating to his trailer and refusing to emerge unless Schrader vowed to never direct again, forcing the director to kneel and promise before breaking that vow immediately. The film's refusal to provide comfort or redemption, its willingness to sit with religious horror and parental failure, created something that can't be replicated by safety-obsessed executives, though institutional corruption proved just as difficult to capture honestly.
I do love you. I just never knew how to show you.
Vanity was in the throes of severe crack cocaine addiction during the shoot, behavior so erratic that director John Frankenheimer assigned handlers to monitor her through scenes where she appeared visibly high.
I make that in 5 minutes with the shoe clerks.
The production operated under Cannon Films' anything goes atmosphere, where drug use was tolerated as long as cameras kept rolling. Vanity later admitting she was living in a fog while portraying a character who was herself a victim of the drug trade. Real-life desperation bleeding into her performance as the informant, with haunting, glassy-eyed authenticity critics praised without knowing the toll. Meanwhile, a young Kelly Preston was bound and gagged for her brutal execution scene, required to deliver perfect terror while psychopathic Bobby Shy shot her at point-blank range on video, Frankenheimer insisting on multiple takes in a cramped, sweltering Los Angeles apartment. The actor playing the killer remained cold and menacing between takes, refusing to break character. Preston later describing the experience as terrifying because the video quality simulating real snuff film made it feel disturbingly realistic for a young actress whose career was being launched by extreme victimization. The film about a self-made millionaire fighting blackmailers who murdered his mistress was meant to be shot in Detroit to capture the gritty industrial atmosphere of Elmore Leonard's novel, but Cannon slashed the budget to $5 million just weeks before production. What makes the film work despite bargain basement production is how Frankenheimer treats violence as consequence rather than spectacle. Harry Mitchell's blue-collar toughness and strategic mind turning standard thriller into masterclass and calculated revenge where every move matters. The film barely broke even with $5.1 million at the box office, but the mean-spirited realism and refusal to soften Leonard's brutality created something that still feels dangerous decades later, a quality certain New York productions were about to take even further.
How come you come busting in here when I'm going to hand you $50,000 in cash?
Danny Cielo is a superstar narcotics detective in the NYPD's corrupt Special Investigative Unit who agrees to cooperate with federal prosecutors to expose systemic rot, promising he won't betray his partners. The detective's testimony led to 52 indictments of his former partners, 2 of whom committed suicide rather than face trial, making the 3-hour film about betrayal and institutional corruption feel uncomfortably real for everyone involved. Actor Treat Williams spent over a month living with the real cop, whose story this was, moving into his home and wearing his actual clothes, then accompanied real narcotics officers on drug busts in the South Bronx until he started thinking like a cop. Director Sidney Lumet issued a non-negotiable ultimatum that the film had to run at least 3 hours. Believing the slow burn nature of moral compromise couldn't be captured in 90 minutes, the screenwriter producing a 365-page first draft in 10 days. What makes the length essential is how it refuses to simplify complexity, showing how a man trying to expose corruption without betraying partners ends up destroying the brotherhood he tried to protect, each compromise leading inevitably to the next. The production was haunted by real dangers. The detective living under constant assassination threats from both the mob and former NYPD colleagues, several background actors actually undercover officers assigned to watch production. Death threats were phoned into the office, creating paranoid atmosphere where cast felt surveilled by the people they portrayed. The 2-hour 45-minute runtime grossed only $8 million against an $8.6 million budget, but the masterpiece status proves what streaming's algorithm-driven pacing has cost us in narrative depth, though institutional corruption wasn't the only kind these films exposed.
The first thing a cop learns is he can't trust anybody but his partners.
Eric Roberts lost dangerous weight to play jittery, hyperactive Paulie, achieving a scrawny, hungry look that contrasted with Mickey Rourke's polished maitre d' cousin Charlie, then adopted manic energy so intense he refused to sit between takes, pacing and talking to himself to maintain the character's internal anxiety. The two cousins get fired from their restaurant jobs in Little Italy, forcing the desperate Paulie to convince Charlie to participate in a safe-cracking heist that accidentally targets a mafia kingpin's hidden cash. What makes the film work beyond Robert's unhinged performance is how it captures the tragedy of loyalty between cousins whose bond is tested by extreme violence until you understand that family ties can be both salvation and trap. Geraldine Page earned an Oscar nomination for 6 minutes as the alcoholic mother of a cop killed in the robbery, her brief appearance becoming the film's most prestigious legacy. Despite starring the two hottest young actors and an $8 million budget, the film grossed only $6.1 million, MGM struggling to market it as either gritty thriller or buddy comedy, before pulling it from theaters within 3 weeks. The box office failure was merely prelude to massive home video cult following, aspiring actors viewing Rourke and Roberts' chemistry as gold standard. The film's status as quintessential New York masterpiece cited by directors like Tarantino proves timing means nothing when the work resonates, a truth the South was about to demonstrate in its own way.
Where the hell you been, man? I'm waiting a goddamn hour. I gotta go shopping.
Hey, Cookie, don't bust my balls, all right? Come on.
Honey.
Dennis Quaid plays Remy McSwain, a charming New Orleans homicide detective who operates with flexible ethics in a city where corruption is a way of life, until dedicated prosecutor Ann Osborne arrives to investigate a massive police bribery ring. Quaid has spent weeks attempting to master New Orleans dialect before deciding to create a stylized sing-song version that made him sound like no human being who has ever existed, a risk the director initially worried would become distraction. The exaggerated accent became viral talking point before the term existed, audiences either loving its spicy charm or mocking its inaccuracy. Quaid later admitting he was swinging for the fences with delivery that prioritized vibe over accuracy, the preposterousness becoming the film's most enduring trait. The script's romantic scenes were originally standard thriller tropes until their sexual tension became so palpable that the director scrapped planned choreography and let the actors play, leading to the famous Ice Cube scene and intimate moments that felt dangerously real. This raw chemistry shifted tone from standard procedural toward erotic thriller, Barkin's performance so impactful it saved her career from stalling in girlfriend roles. The $17.6 million gross on modest budget turned New Orleans into major filming hub, but its legacy of tension continued as real-world corruption scandals kept mirroring the plot for years, proving uncomfortable truths create lasting impact. Though not every masterpiece needed corruption as its subject.
Does stuff ever get through you?
Well, me? Bullets bounce off me.
Robert Duvall drove over 600 miles across Texas, carrying a tape recorder to capture specific cadences and regional dialects, engaging strangers in hours-long conversations to absorb speech rhythm for playing Mac Sledge, a washed-up alcoholic country singer who wakes up broke in a Texas roadside motel and offers to work for the widow owner Rosa Lee in exchange for a room and a chance to sober up. The dedication extended to musical performance, Duvall insisting on singing all his own songs to ensure the character's voice felt authentic to his weathered face, spending nights jamming with local country bands where he went unrecognized. What makes the performance devastating is how Duvall weaponizes restraint, trusting that a man trying to outrun his past wouldn't perform emotions, but would instead bury them under manual labor and small kindnesses, letting failures accumulate in silence until single moments of connection carry overwhelming force, treating recovery as unglamorous repetition rather than dramatic transformation. Produced for $4.5 million, an initially shelved platform release strategy moving city to city on word of mouth, grossed $8.4 million. The understated masterpiece losing Best Picture to the melodramatic terms of endearment still generates bitterness among cinephiles who recognize which film actually endured. Reminder that streaming's engines optimized for immediate emotional payoff will always prioritize crowd pleasers over quiet truth, though not every masterpiece was quiet about its manipulation.
Have anything to eat?
No.
Are you hungry?
I guess so.
Playwright David Mamet's directorial debut brought his controversial Mamet speak philosophy, requiring actors to deliver lines with flat mechanical cadence, stripping away emotional acting to let rhythm do the work, a method that pushed lead actress and then wife Lindsay Krause to emotional breaking point as her own husband obsessively controlled every syllable. The film follows psychiatrist Margaret Ford, who confronts conman Mike to clear a patient's gambling debt only to become seduced by the world of elaborate scams and discover she's been the ultimate mark all along. The rigid atmosphere was so thick the crew felt they were witnessing a marriage's slow disintegration in real-time, creative friction becoming primary factor in their eventual divorce. The film only exists because legendary sleight-of-hand master Ricky Jay refused to reveal RealCon's secrets on camera, spending weeks with Mamet inventing a brand new scam that looked authentic but wasn't being used by criminals. The $2.8 million production grossed just $2.5 million despite perfect reviews, forcing Mamet into indie exile but cementing secret masterpiece status on home video. The film's cold examination of manipulation and refusal to provide emotional catharsis proves that sometimes the most satisfying endings are the ones that leave you unsettled. Exactly what these 10 films understood that modern cinema has forgotten.